made a ton of mistakes, but I don't really see them as much mistakes. Like every mistake is a learning opportunity in its core. I mean, I've had lots of inventory that came in that's had the wrong UPC code on it that I've had to resticker. Have had issues when I'm working with a new website developer and then they crash our site on Black Friday. I mean, I've had so many things that have happened, and you take it all with a grain of salt and hope that it makes you stronger.
This is BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgensen.
Welcome out to BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio. I'm your host, Tyler Jorgensen, and today we get to talk to somebody who has had their product seen on Shark Tank. It's kind of a fun full circle moment for me because in our very first season, we had 3 Shark Tank of the season 1 contestants or guests on the show. And so that's cool to have another one. Welcome out to the show, Olivia Abrams.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So thank you for being here, especially we navigated some fun scheduling things and got here eventually. Usually I just dive right in, but I just want to talk about the fact, like your product called TickMitt. It really cool. And so I just want to start by teeing that up, that you've created this amazing product. You've been on Shark Tank. You're one of Time's best inventions. I'm in Southern California where ticks aren't super scary, but they don't not exist either. And they are scary a little bit for pets and stuff. So I'm just excited to be here and talk about your product. But I also want to talk about you and how you got here. So when was that moment in your life where you first realized that you were an entrepreneur?
I probably was weaned on entrepreneurship. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. My grandpa had started an insurance company, and would go to people's homes and help them figure out how much to charge people after they had a fire or a flood and things like that. And then my dad and my uncle did a lot of businesses together. They owned bars and restaurants. Then my dad owned a construction company when I was a kid. So I would go with him to construction sites. Once a year, he would take me out of school and we would go see what project he was working on and then get ice cream. And then when I was in middle school, my parents actually worked on a business together and I'm an only child. So, we weren't talking about what I did at school that day. We were talking about branding and franchising opportunities. So I kind of always thought I would have an entrepreneurial journey of some sort.
Yeah. So, I mean, that you're saying you were weaned on it is absolutely true. You were raised in it. And for some, that pushes them away from it. They're like, oh, I didn't like that we didn't talk about my schooling at the dinner table, or they didn't. Were you drawn to it, or did it just feel natural?
I think that there was probably a time in my life where I was like, should I, shouldn't I? My dad was always very much pushing me to network and explore different career opportunities, because entrepreneurship is obviously very tough. And my dad didn't go to college, so he really wanted me to have a strong idea of like what I should study and, where I might want to see my career going. And so I spent a lot of time in like high school and earlier in college, kind of reaching out to my friends' parents and asking them what they did and what their life looked like in their day to day. And I was like, should I be a lawyer? Should I, work in nonprofit? Should I do marketing? And I was like, I kind of like everything that everyone's telling me. And I guess the only way to do that would be to start my own company where I'm forced to do everything.
Yeah, that's fair. And so after all those conversations, after all those things, was this your first jump into entrepreneurship? And if not, what was?
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely started like little tiny things growing up. I was very creative and artsy. My mom is something of an artist, and I would make a lot of bracelets growing up and I would just like sell them on the side of the street. I would like try to get all of my friends involved in like random projects, even if they didn't actually make me any money. I would be like, we're going to make the world's largest crochet ball and submit it to Guinness World Records. I was always like trying to steer people in a direction of some kind. And then I decided when I got to college that I was going to study entrepreneurship. And the idea for TickMitt actually happened before I even got to school. And then I ended up working on it in college as well. And then graduated kind of in the middle of the pandemic where no one could get a job. And it was probably a bad time to start a business. So I ended up falling into finance for about a year and a half before I got so miserable and left.
I love how many people like gave it a go. Like, let me
Yeah.
see if I can do this. The one of the most grueling 9 to 5s out there. So you mentioned that you had the idea even before college. What
Yeah.
brought you to TickMitt, and why? What was the problem there?
I think that the best entrepreneurs, the ones that are really adding value to the world, were ones that were inspired by their own issues. So, really solving a problem, not just kind of marketing a whole new concept. And I was always really inspired as a kid by companies that also had a give back or mission driven component, like Warby Parker or Bombas or Tom's Shoes, and read a lot about those as a child. I was actually diagnosed with Lyme disease when I was 7 years old. Everyone in my family has been diagnosed with Lyme disease at some point or another. And I spent a lot of time in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley as a kid, and my parents recently retired there, so they live there full time now. I also always grew up with big dogs. So I've had Rottweilers, and now my parents have Mastiffs. And in upstate New York and a lot of areas of this country, it's basically impossible to avoid getting ticks on your dog. And so we were really inspired to find a solution where we could find and remove the ticks from ourselves and our dogs before we let them back into the house. And that's kind of what inspired this journey.
I've never heard somebody say that everybody in my family. Now, you are an only child, so that's not a giant family.
But I mean, extended family. I mean, maybe it's based on where you live, but
Well,
New York,
I'm sure
New
that's a
York
factor.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
But
New
I
York
still
and
just like that shocked
Pennsylvania.
me. I know that ticks are prevalent, but is Lyme disease that common?
In the Northeast, 50% of ticks carry Lyme disease. So if you
Wow.
get bit by a tick in the Northeast, the chances of you getting Lyme disease are extremely high. There are some studies that show that like 14% of the world population has some part of a tick-borne disease. The CDC
14%?
Yep. The CDC estimates that there's 500,000 new cases of Lyme disease every year, and I'm only talking about Lyme disease. So there are a host of other tick-borne diseases. When we started this company, we were very much under the impression this was a Northeast issue affecting people with dogs. And we could not have been more wrong. This is a worldwide epidemic that we are in. It has not hit you yet, but it probably will. And especially in the US, the Northeast and the upper Midwest are hotspots, but there are cases all over the world. I mean, in Australia, they have paralysis ticks. They have Lyme disease in Europe. All of the ticks in Puerto Rico, the dogs that are coming up in the shelters there are covered in ticks. Like, this is a
Yeah.
huge problem. And
Quick
Lyme
disclaimer
disease,
to any of our hypochondriac listeners. You are now going to be terrified.
oh yeah,
But I had no idea it was this big of a concern. And
yeah. It is the
you know,
number one vector-borne disease in the United States, and it is getting significantly worse due to climate change and a number of other factors.
Yeah, I did have, like, growing up, I had a friend's brother who got Lyme disease, and it was pretty bad. Like, and I had no idea. That was the first I'd heard of it, right? And it was very debilitating for this person, and massively changed the direction and course of their life. And so, obviously, I mean, okay, so you were like, okay, we need to solve this. And so
Yeah.
what happened? Did you look out and first try to just see if there was a good solution and it didn't exist? What was the next step?
I think that we had used a number of solutions throughout the years. Obviously, we always had tweezers at home. So if we did find an embedded tick in one of us, we use that to remove it. We would use bug sprays, but there was just not enough. And I find that especially with something that can be so scary and debilitating, like you said, it's important to have a number of different things in your arsenal to keep you and your family safe. And we kind of discovered this by happenstance. Like I said, we have mastiffs and they drool a lot. So my family growing up and still today, we keep bath towels all over our home. Like if you walk around our house, in every room, there's a random bath towel on the chair, on the floor, preparing for a drooling mouth to come on and sit on me. And so, we would wipe their faces with these towels and we would find random things that they would pick up from outside. So that could have been like leaves, other insects, burrs. And we said, maybe we can make a fabric that picks up ticks. And so we had a friend of a friend that was a tick scientist, which is, I now realize that there are hundreds of tick scientists all over the country that I work with. So yes, that is a thing. And we worked with her on and off for a couple of years, kind of testing different fabrics, and eventually we're able to create our own that works. It's a type of microfiber, and what's unique about it is that it's designed to work like Velcro. So ticks have legs that differ in size depending on how old the tick is. If it's a baby tick versus an adult tick, it obviously is a different size. And there's also different species, and their legs are hooks. And so we were able to determine the right loop size that will pick up all of these different types and sizes of tick, and have been able to get a patent in a number of different countries for that product.
Wow. So how quick did you go from, I have an idea, because you said it took a couple years on the fabric, right?
Yeah.
And working with these different scientists. So how long did it take you to go from idea to a product worth testing to your first sale?
It probably could have been a lot faster, but it took a very, very long time just because so much life happened. This was probably an idea that my family and I came up with when I was in middle school or early high school. My parents owned another business at the time. Obviously, I was a student. Then I went into college and decided to study entrepreneurship. I worked on this as a class project. And then COVID hit, which, half of our market are outdoorsy people. No one was going outside.
Right.
So then I decided, because also the economy, to get a stable job for a little while. So, this could have been 10 years at least of, when we first thought of this idea to when we sold our first one. But I will promise you that is not the case for everyone.
Well, and absolutely. And so there's that early idea, but maybe let's shorten it up to where you're like, when you finally decided to make it happen. Once you got that momentum and you got that going, you built a prototype. How did you test the market?
Yeah, so we spent, that whole time kind of just being like, hey, we have this idea. And we would talk to friends, family, neighbors about it. And especially where we live, everyone absolutely loved it and thought that we should do it. And so, we prototyped for a long time and kind of had a finished product just waiting for us. Until we decided to take the jump and, quit my job. And while I was still working, we did our first set of photo shoots and videos for social and finalized our website, and then launched the company in March 2023.
And what was your go-to-market? Did you launch direct to consumer or did you launch straight into stores?
Yeah, we started direct to consumer on our website. Again, I come from a family of entrepreneurs, but no one in my family had ever run a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business.
Wow.
So, they were very used to like brick and mortar and service-based companies. And so I was kind of just figuring out as we went. We would post on social, we would tell some of our friends. It was just like a little tiny idea that a couple people would buy here and there for a few months. And then we were able to get in contact with Good Morning America. And we did one of the deals and steals segments about 2 or 3 months after we launched the company. And because, we wanted to have decent margins, we ended up ordering 10,000 units, which is a very big run for, a brand new idea. And we sold 8,000 units in 6 hours on that show.
Wow.
And we had been on the market for like 2 or 3 months. So that confirmed to us that we were solving a real problem.
That's wild,
And
because that I don't hear those going well. They definitely don't go well every time, right?
yeah,
But that's awesome. What a great like success, and probably a real big catalyst and momentum of just keeping you excited about the project.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
how did you end up on Shark Tank? What made you want to do that?
Yeah, so we had been on the market for maybe a year and a half to 2 years when I was, when you start a company, every single person you're like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. Their first reaction is, you should go on Shark Tank. I'm sure if you own a company, you have heard that before. It's very common. And I had a friend who had known some of the producers at the show. I think that she had, been asked to be on the show before, but just didn't really feel like it was the right fit for her business. And so she recommended me. And so I was able to kind of bypass some of those in-person auditions, which is how most people get on the show. They're really important. It was just an amazing opportunity. We were pretty hesitant at first just because we didn't know if we were big enough yet, but we just really loved everyone who worked at that show, and they made us feel so comfortable and supported. And so we thought, why the hell not? And we actually are about to hit our 1 year anniversary. We were on May 16th, 2025. So it was about a year ago that we were on Shark Tank.
Yeah. And so how much, for those that didn't catch that episode, right? What was the outcome of the experience? But then also, how did it just impact the business?
Yeah. So I think all of the sharks had varying degrees on how much they knew about this issue. We had a lot of time explaining some of the things that I explained to you earlier in the show. And, Barbara was able to tell this really amazing story about her son contracting Lyme disease as well, and how it has impacted her. And, so she gave us an offer, and we also received an offer from Mr. Wonderful. But we felt that we had a lot more room to grow in our company, that we were kind of just getting started, and we didn't feel like the valuations that we were offered were the right fit for us at that time. And so we decided to decline those offers. And really, the month that we aired, we did more in sales than we had done the entire year before. And we're on track to, last year we quadrupled in sales, and we're on track to do the same this year.
That's awesome. And I've heard that before, where there's the effect of the show, even if you don't get investments or partnerships out of it. That's super helpful.
Yeah, and I think one thing that it really allowed, aside from, growth in sales and brand awareness, is it really does give you a leg up when talking to buyers in retail. I think retail can be a very difficult place, especially for new brands, and especially when you only have a couple of SKUs, retailers are less likely to take a gamble on you. And I think that we were able to get into some of the retailers that we're in now a little bit sooner as a new brand, because we had that Shark Tank experience.
Yeah, for sure. Now, just a little bit of peeling back the curtains, right? The episode, usually when it airs, it shows someone like you on the show for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes. How long was the actual experience?
You feel like you're in there forever, and you feel like you're not in there for very long. If I had to guess, I was in there for maybe 45 minutes.
Yeah.
But you have no idea. And, I kind of refer to my Shark Tank experience as jumping out of a plane. It's a super exciting, terrifying, once in a lifetime experience. And once you get through your pitch at the beginning, you kind of just black out. And when you watch the show back, and this is an experience I think a lot of Shark Tank alumni have, is that when you watch the show back, you really don't remember a lot of what happened in there.
Yeah, for sure. Which is all the more reason to know what your parameters are, right, for your deal before getting to the deal, right?
Exactly.
Because you got 2 offers, but you had the wherewithal to say no. Was that difficult?
Yeah, it's very difficult. But I mean, you don't want to sell yourself short. And you want someone who you truly feel like is going to be the right fit for you and believe in you. I've spoken to Allison Ellsworth, the founder of Poppy, before, and she, was like, I'm a Shark Tank alumni too. And she explained to me, I don't know if we would have taken a deal if it wasn't for Rohan. Like, he was just such a perfect fit for us. And I really don't know if we had that person who had offered us a deal that I think could have had that same impact that Rohan had at Poppy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely, as much as what the deal is, it's who the offer came from. And sometimes that's if it was the right guest person on the show or whatever it may be.
But I was really grateful because I've always wanted to speak to Mark Cuban. And we were on his last episode on Shark Tank. So I'm really glad that we got in there before he retired.
That's cool. I'm glad that happened for you. What, Lyme disease is a scary thing, right? And this kind of led you to building this amazing company that you're now having this great success. But I'm sure along the way over these past few years, there's been some big setbacks too. What's one of the biggest challenges that you've faced and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, we were probably told about a month before when our air date for Shark Tank was going to be. And that was about the same time that the tariffs rose significantly. And we, were manufacturing in China, and we had shipped in a lot of inventory preparing. We are probably going to air on Shark Tank, but we actually started going viral on social media the month before we aired. And so we went through a lot of our inventory, and then we had to bring in more. And due to the tariffs, we, sold out within a couple of hours after our Shark Tank episode aired. And we had a lot of inventory kind of just sitting in customs. And I remember emailing almost everyone who bought a TickMitt during the Shark Tank episode and saying, I don't want to hike your prices. And I also am a small business and obviously need to have some profit off of this. Would you be so kind as to wait a couple of weeks for your order? If that's a problem for you, please let me know. I'll get what I have to you, right away. But due to the tariffs, we would really appreciate your support. And almost every single person came back to us and they were like, we totally understand. We don't want to be charged more. We don't want to have you charged more. And thankfully, we made the right call and the tariffs came down after about 2 weeks. And then I spent 2 weeks in my parents' basement packing orders. So that's how our Shark Tank experience went. And that was difficult in many ways.
Yeah. Well, massive kudos to you for how you handled that, because navigating those types of challenges is hard enough. But I love how you communicated with the clients and with your customers and just talk to them and just explain the situation. It's so fascinating how many businesses forget to do that the buyers are real humans on the other side. And a lot of times you just have to have a conversation. I like that you also shared, something like that just really showed your character and stuff. What about a mistake maybe that you made and how'd you fix that?
I've made a ton of mistakes, but I don't really see them as much mistakes. Like, every mistake is a learning opportunity in its core. I mean, I've had, lots of inventory that came in that's had the wrong UPC code on it that I've had to resticker. I, have had issues when I'm working with a new website developer and then they crash our site on Black Friday. I mean, I've had so many things that have happened, and you take it all with a grain of salt and hope that it makes you stronger.
Yeah, for sure. So I thought it was fascinating that you were raised in this entrepreneurial world, restaurants and construction. These are tough businesses.
Yeah.
But no one had ever done direct to consumer or e-commerce. What's your recommendation, now that you're a Forbes 30 under 30, you're Shark Tank alumni, right? You have all these, I'm sure you have people come to you now for advice. What type of business do you tell them, other people to get into?
I have really fallen in love with the consumer packaged goods industry. I feel like it would be really hard for me to be in any other industry personally. I love the ability to have strong relationships with our customers directly. I love building a product that stands for something. There's such a wonderful people in this industry, whether that's buyers at retail stores or other peers of mine or mentors that I've made over this time. I think at one point I thought it would be really fun to run a restaurant, and now that doesn't appeal to me nearly as much. But I do think there's something so amazing about being in CPG. And it's really fun. I feel like I hear from a lot of people who are in service-based companies. And half the reason I got into this business is I get to like hang out with dog influencers. Like it's great, I'm thriving.
Right.
So yeah, I think the most important thing is to really just find something that you're passionate about, because if you're passionate about it, it doesn't feel like a job.
Yeah, every day is going to have its challenges, but if it's something that you at least enjoy, makes them a little bit easier to.
Yeah, I mean, if I loved music, like maybe I should have done something in music that was service related, or, an agent or what have you. But that's not, I love helping people. I love dogs. I love being in nature. I'm really passionate about health and wellness and our healthcare system. And so I feel like I was able to kind of have a lot of things that I cared a lot about fall within the business I created.
That's awesome. And that leads in perfectly to this question, where for me, business is not just about making money and profit, but it's also about helping you create a life that you truly love.
Yeah.
What's one item on your personal bucket list that you're going to accomplish in the next 12 months?
I would love to do more public speaking, honestly. It's something I really enjoy. So I would love to speak at a conference, maybe, a female founder conference or something like Eudaimonia, which is a health conference, or something like South by Southwest. So would love to get on the stage and talk about things that I'm passionate about is what I would love to accomplish in the next 12 months, as well as some of our, big retail launches and new product launches we have planned.
Yeah. Awesome. Always. Yeah. It's funny. The entrepreneurs always come back, right? It's like, well, here's what I want to do personally, but also can't not talk about what the business goals are. Where do people go if they want to learn more about TickMitt and or Olivia Abrams?
Yeah, you can go to tickmitt.com, or we're tick.mitt on all social platforms. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming out on the show and for sharing your experience of how you created this amazing product, and for terrifying me on the stats of ticks and Lyme disease.
I really think you should be a little bit more careful. You seem to have kids, and if you travel at all, you're going to want that thing in your suitcase.
Now I know. Yeah.
Need to
Now
have a
I
tick.
know. Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And to all my biz ninjas, wherever you're listening, watching, or tuning in, it's your turn to go out and do something.